Meet Dimitri. He walks out of the company event with his eyes to the floor, shaking his head, thinking, "You did it again. Why can't you just be normal? Why are you so weird?" Dimitri is a Scrum Master at a digital services company in Toronto. In his leadership role, he consistently receives positive feedback, and he's confident in his ability to do his job. However, he struggles to connect with others, especially higher ups, which he believes is affecting his career growth. For months, Dimitri has looked forward to a company event where he can mingle with the executive team. He knows it's a great opportunity to build relationships, especially with the COO, Amir, who he really admires. He's played the conversation with Amir over and over in his mind, and every time he thinks about speaking with Amir or any other executive, it makes him incredibly nervous. Arriving at the event a few minutes early, Dimitri heads straight to the bar for a drink. Standing at the bar alone is Amir. Dimitri feels a surge of anxiety. Amir glances over, and Dimitri immediately looks away, pretending not to notice. His inner voice urges, "Say something. Don't be weird. Say hello." Dimitri glances over, and instead of saying hello, self-doubt kicks in. He doesn't want to talk to you. He doesn't know who you are. You're a nobody to him. You shouldn't bother him. Maybe you'll get a chance later. So Dimitri says nothing. He walks away and finds a seat at a table in the back of the room, watching others walk in and approach Amir with ease. He feels absolutely defeated. He sits alone, trying to focus on the presentation. And at dinner, he sits next to his VP, and Amir takes a seat across from them. His VP introduces him. "Amir, this is Dimitri, our Scrum Master I was telling you about." Amir, recalling their earlier encounter at the bar, says, "Oh, hi, Dimitri. It's nice to meet you. I've heard a lot of great things about you." Dimitri freezes, and after an awkward pause, mumbles, "Oh, thank you. It's nice to meet you too," before putting his head down and eating in silence. By the end of the evening, Dimitri feels completely down on himself, wondering why he struggles so much to talk with others, especially those he perceives are authority figures. Today, we'll be discussing Dimitri's story with one of my closest friends, Brett McDermott, a successful entrepreneur, host of the Persistence Playbook podcast, and expert on hacking charisma. I'm excited to hear Brett's take on what Dimitri's going through, how to work through fears to be able to better connect with others, and tools he would recommend to be a more charismatic communicator. My name is Jay Abbasi, and welcome to Unstuck. Real people, real stories, real solutions. While the details are changed to protect anonymity, what you just heard is based on a true story of challenges that come up in the real world. And we discuss how to navigate these environments with practical tips to help you get unstuck and build a more fulfilling, impactful, and balanced life and career. I like to begin a lot of these conversations with a story, if I have a good one. And the problem is you and I have a lot of stories. Stories of our...
I don't know if they're all good, but they're there.
I know. Some of them I won't be sharing because they're a little bit more either embarrassing or we've known each other for too long. So, but I do have one story I'd love to share. Is that okay?
Sure. Hit me with it.
Okay. So this was when I was in college. You were in college too. And I remember I was on campus. You called me out of the blue. I don't know if you remember this. You called me out of the blue and you said to me, you've been doing a lot of work on yourself, your own personal development journey. And one of the things that you wanted to do was to share your appreciation for the people in your life. And you just started saying all these kind things to me. And I'll never forget it. And it really, I think, speaks to your character, the kind of person you are, the way you want to connect with people, and the work that you do on yourself. So I just wanted to start by saying thank you for doing that. I never forgot it. Thank you for our friendship, and thank you for being here, man.
I appreciate that, brother. Thank you for being an incredible friend and inspiration to me. A lot of the things that I'm going after in my life are because I see you going after similar things. So I certainly appreciate what you've been to me, and what you continue to be to me as a friend. And I can't say I really recall that exact conversation. I have an idea of maybe when it might have happened. I may have been at some type of conference, and you know how personal development conferences really kind of get you feeling the feelings, and they're beautiful things because they kind of get you to take action and say some things that maybe you wouldn't normally say, but maybe you wanted to say for a long time. So I think that might have been like maybe at like lunchtime of like a Tony Robbins-esque type conference. And but hey, listen, I'm happy that I made that call, and I still feel the same way, dude. You are an incredible brother.
I appreciate you saying that, man. You know the feeling is mutual. And look, that's, I mean, what, over 15 years later, it's something I remember. And so that kind of impact, it obviously had an impact on me. I haven't forgotten it. And it I think is a good jumping off point to learning more about your background. We'll get into Dimitri too, but really I want to learn about your journey because you have been on a personal development journey and a growth journey. And I'm sure that there is something that triggered that. There's something in your life that it made you want to pursue more, develop yourself. If you were to go back, Brett, and identify what was the trigger? What was the life experience that led to you pursuing this journey? What was it?
If I had to kind of really pinpoint when I first got into personal development and just the journey of, wanting to improve myself in all different aspects of lives, I was working as an electrician. I was working as like a set electrician on different movies and TV shows. And it was like an okay job. It was a lot of manual labor. I wasn't terribly passionate about it. It paid reasonably well. And, when I told people I worked on, TV show sets, they always thought it was cool. So, that was a fun part of it in my 20s, was able to make people think I was doing something I was passionate about, even though I wasn't. So I'd say I was working in a job that I really didn't enjoy, and I was doing that for a few years, kind of searching for answers in my 20s, as I feel like a lot of us do, right? That's a part of a lot of our journeys, is our 20s, kind of searching for answers and searching for our path, something to really sink our teeth into, that's going to make us jump out of bed in the morning. I certainly hadn't found it yet. And I really think that the first book that I ever read that kind of expanded my mind to maybe there's something more in this life. Maybe I really could do some great things. And I think it's the first personal development book that a lot of people stumble upon, and it's Think and Grow Rich. And I think almost everyone's heard of this book. Most of us have read that book, and some of that book I agree with today, and then some of it I don't agree with. 10, 15 years later, I don't think it's necessarily like the gospel of personal development. But I would say, if I had to really be honest with you and just think of like the first moment in time where I was like, wait a second, like I can improve myself and really do great things if I commit to it. I think it was probably stumbling upon that book. A friend of mine, I think it was Sky Nasir, gave it to me, or lent it to me, and I haven't seen Sky in years. No clue what he's doing these days. But I will always appreciate the fact that he kind of introduced me to personal development, and from there, just read a lot more books, went to a lot of conferences, and I'm 38 now. I got to say, I'm still learning. I'm still figuring out exactly, what my path is, and how to summon the courage to really go after what I want in life. And I think that's just, just a day by day process, but it's something that I'm certainly committed to.
Yeah, I know you are. I know you're committed to it because we talk all the time, and this is something that's a priority for you. And I think that the the funny part of that story is I have a similar one where you said Sky, that you haven't talked to him in years. I
Sure.
have a person in my life. His name's Omar. He introduced me to Tony Robbins and to Brian Tracy and Zig Ziglar so many years ago. And it's making me think, man, I got to reach out to Omar and talk to him and say thank you
For
for
sure.
making that introduction, because I agree with you. I don't necessarily feel like everything there is the gospel, but it definitely was the inspiration and it led me down that path. And one thing that it led you down is the path of also being a an effective communicator. And what's funny is, Brad, I know this because I've been around you. You have a very natural way of connecting with people. You do it, and it seems like it's not any effort, right? And I do think there is some baseline character trait that we all have when it comes to certain skill sets, right? But I also know you've done the work in the area of communication. So talk to me a little bit about that, how you have done this work on yourself to be a more confident, charismatic communicator.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I love how you brought up Brian Tracy and Zig Ziglar. That's how you know you got two guys in their late 30s that are talking personal development. You know, there's no podcast going on right now with two guys in their mid 20s that are talking Zig Ziglar. I love it. That we're talking about some OGs back then, but still guys that are worth
Oh
reading. I
yeah.
mean, their stuff is still extremely relevant today. As far as I'd say, like, my personal work on my communication skill set, as well as just, my ability to connect with people, I think I agree with what you said. There certainly is a baseline level of talent that we get birthed, or maybe not birthed into, but just the way we're raised and what we are exposed to as we grow up. Let's say we had a parent or two parents that were very good with people and that were charismatic, then of course we're going to absorb some of that, and that is part of it. But I also think that it's a skill that we can build, and I think that I recognized at some point that if I put a real emphasis on improving my ability to connect with people, and my ability to communicate in a powerful way, if I focused on being a better listener and more present to other people's messages while they were delivering them to me, then in the end I could have a more positive impact on the world around me. And again, I would say if it went back to one specific moment where I realized that, like, people skills were kind of the foundation for all success in this life, I think it would probably be another book, and it would be How to Win Friends and Influence People, which is another one of just the OG personal development books. And but that one, I think, especially, is just timeless. Now, I don't think that one will ever go out of style. I mean, if you just talk about the basic principles in that book, like using someone's name is the sweetest word in the English language to them, is totally true. Or just listening to people and getting them talking about something they're passionate about, putting a little bit more of the spotlight on them than you shine on yourself. Like, these are all just like baseline principles for human interaction that I don't think are going anywhere anytime soon. So I would say that book, was probably the start of it all. And then really since then, I've always just loved reading books on charisma and people skills and effective communication. I've loved watching speakers. I love watching a great speaker, whether it's, Barack Obama, or, as I'm a huge wrestling fan. Maybe it's The Rock, or even, Ric Flair back in his day, or, whether you hate him or like him, Donald Trump today can really command an audience. I think people that can stand up there in front of 5, 10, hundreds, thousands of people and really command an audience is just a skill that I respect. It really is. And I know you've got something coming up yourself. You're about to fill a room with people, and I'm excited to see you up there and watch you perform. And I'm sure I'll be taking some notes myself from that on things I'd like to add to my own communication. But I think if we just really observe the great communicators, the really charismatic, magnetic people, in our world, we can take a little bit from every one of them and we can add it to our own arsenal. And at the end of the day, if we enhance our ability to be magnetic, to be charismatic, to communicate powerfully, then we're going to enhance our ability to impact the world, around us in a positive way. So I think it is just a skill that all of us should really focus on honing if we really want to do big things in this life.
Yeah. Yeah. It's really two things that I'm pulling from what you said. There's influence, but the other one is connection. Because what is life without connection? Connection is such an important part of life, to be able to connect with others, connect with our environment, and be able to influence in a way that's positive, like where we can make an impact in other people's lives. And I think other people recognize this too, Brett, because I talk with people all the time who feel like they are lacking in that area. They struggle with that. They're not able to really cultivate that charisma within them. And in Dimitri's story, he really is struggling with that. He's problem aware, right? We use that term at times. He's aware that it's an issue, which is a great step. When he sees the COO in that story, Amir, he knows if he just gets himself to go talk to him, go start the conversation, something positive will come of that. But he stops himself. So why do we do that? What happens? What's going on where when we know, hey, I should do something here. I should go up to that person. I should start that conversation. I should connect. And then we don't. What's holding us back and how do we work through that?
Sure. I mean, I think at its core, it's certainly a fear of rejection. It's a fear of the unknown, just kind of not knowing exactly how this interaction is going to go. And instead of rolling the dice and risking it, we instead, lean into our fear and we let it, take over and we don't say that hello when we know we should. So I'd say that, there's a few things that Dimitri could have done there. My heart goes out to him because I think we've all felt that way. Even people that are confident and incredibly socially adept, we still have moments where we don't do what we want to do in social settings, where maybe we want to stand up at a dinner table and give a toast to someone special to us, but we don't. We let the fear take over and we don't step up and make that toast. Or maybe there's a pretty girl across the bar and you're single and you want to go talk to her and you don't go and talk to her. And whatever it is, I think that we've all felt that fear and we've all let that fear win beforehand. So I think first and foremost, Dimitri should just remind himself that he's a human being and just to kind of have some grace and just that, once in a while, we're not going to defeat the fear. A lot of times, the fear is going to defeat us and we just have to be okay with that and just keep trying. I think that for people that really struggle though, socially and in situations like this, it's important to remember that social skills, personal, person to person communication, it is just that, it's a skill and it's something that we need to practice. And if we don't practice it, we're not going to get better at it. And some of us, of course, have more natural skill within that area, just like anything else. You played baseball. There's guys that come in first grade that can hit home runs. I remember you were one of the first people to hit home runs, actually. Didn't expect this conversation to go there, but I remember that really pissed me off that you were hitting home runs and I wasn't yet. But yeah, anything you do in life, there's going to be people that are just a little naturally better at it. But it doesn't mean that you can't work your way up to their level with hard work and practice. So for me, I think Dimitri, let's say it's his next conference, his next outing where he knows that there's going to be a lot of professionals there that he'd like to network with. I think it's important to have a goal. Treat that event almost as if it's like, a sports outing that you're going to. Like if you were going to go play golf, you'd probably have a score in your mind that you were trying to shoot. If you were going bowling, you'd probably have some things that you were aiming for as far as a total score. If you're going to a social outing or a conference, you should have a number in mind of the amount of people that you'd like to talk to. And I think for someone like Dimitri, who really feels a lot of social anxiety, keep that number small, maybe just one or two. Your goal at that next conference is just to open one or two new conversations with professionals or people that you don't know. And I think that is just like an important thing is when we go into these outings, treat them as a bit of an exercise, a playground, a place for you to practice your skills, but have some sort of goal in mind. Know the amount of conversations that you'd like to open, and then not only that, have a question or two in your holster that you're ready to fire, in your back pocket, just one or two questions that's icebreakers that can kind of get the ball rolling on a conversation. So for instance, he could have written down in like a notes app before he went into that conference, a couple questions to lean on when he wasn't quite sure what to say, something casual like, are you planning any trips this fall? Or maybe just something like, what's been your favorite part of the conference so far? Like have a couple questions in the back of your mind that you can lean on when you're feeling that fear and you feel frozen, that you can start a conversation with. Because a lot of times that's all you got to do is get the ball rolling. And then it's just a ping pong match of human interaction. And it kind of takes care of itself from there.
Yeah. I remember what you're talking about, by the way, is 2 home runs in one game. One
Oh,
was to right center and one was direct to left field.
oh damn it.
I remember it.
Oh,
And
son of a gun. Still eats me alive. I didn't even really know you at that point. I knew
right.
of you. I mean, we had a mutual friend, Stephen Meyer, who would talk about you. And Jay's a great guy. He's a great athlete. You got to meet him. And I remember I was there a little early for my game, and you were like the earlier game before us. And I remember just sitting there on the field, just watching you hit rockets over that fence, and it just kind of made my blood curdle a little bit. Still does.
Oh, that's so funny. Oh, man. I don't have a lot of my long-term memory isn't great, and we've talked about this, but, like, I can't remember a lot of things from when I was very young, but I do remember that game, and I remember hitting those homers. But anyway, so there are things there that you mentioned that I kinda wanna dive deeper into because I think that the fear part is a big part. You're right. I
Sure.
think fear is what holds us back. So you gave some really good examples of how to prepare for it and in the moment be able to respond in a way where you have this bank of questions. But what have you done personally for yourself to really work through that fear? Like, in other words, yes, there are tactical things, and I want to dive deeper into the tactical with you in this conversation. But before we even get there, there's mindset work, I think, that needs to get done to cultivate more of that confidence. So, what have you done that has helped you to be able to have the confidence to open up those conversations? Is there any mindset tools or things that you've put into practice that you feel have helped you that you would recommend for Dimitri or for somebody in this situation?
Yeah, and that's a great question. And for me, I'd sometimes just like some inner dialogue or some mantras, that I'll lean on. Like, let's say I'm walking into a room where there's going to be people there that are maybe more successful than me, or perhaps they just know more about the topic that we're going to be speaking of than I do, and there's a little bit of like uneasiness inside of me, like, do I have any value to really bring to this conversation? I think it's just important to remind ourselves that, like, I am a unique human being that can bring a unique and valuable perspective to this conversation, and that's just kind of something that I'll say to myself once in a while, is just remind myself, like, I have a unique and valuable perspective that I can bring to this conversation that nobody else can, right? Because
Mm.
we are all unique. We all have such different circumstances and memories to draw off of. And we really do. We all do have a unique perspective to bring to every conversation. Even if we're not an expert within that topic or that domain, we really do have value to bring to every conversation. Doesn't mean you have to, be leading the conversation at the table. Maybe you only have one or two things to say, but you will have some piece of value to bring to almost every conversation that you're in. So I think that's just one thing that I try and remind myself of when I'm walking into a room that I don't feel totally confident in. And I would say, as far as just, some of the other work that I've done on myself that I think has helped me to be, socially, confident, is to kind of like almost use fear as your ally, and don't necessarily ignore fear when you feel it in social situations. I think, fear is going to be part of the human experience. We all feel it, whether we're going on stage for a speech or we're just sitting down at a dinner table and we're about to tell a story. Like, there's a bodily sensation that we label as fear, and it's there. It's not going away, and that's okay. And I think instead of ignoring it, it's better that we kind of lean into that bodily sensation and really feel it. Like, what does that fear feel like? Like, what? Maybe it's like a burning in my chest. Maybe it's a tightness, in my shoulders. Whatever it is, I think we all feel fear a little bit differently. But I do think if we really focus on the sensation, the bodily sensation of fear when we're in these social situations, and lean into it, we'll find that that feeling dissipates a little bit, and it kind of creates enough space that we can then take the action that we need to. In this case, Dimitri saying hello to Amir. Maybe it's telling a story at a dinner table. Maybe it's getting up and giving that toast that you want to give for your good buddy. But I do think that when I feel fear, really, in any point in my life, or especially in a social setting where I'm trying to really make an impact, I try and lean into that fear. I try and feel it, really feel it. What is that bodily sensation? And just by focusing on that feeling, I find it turns the volume down on it just enough to create that space so that I can take the action I want to take.
Yeah. For our listeners, I know you've heard us discuss how to feel that fear and see it as an ally, and you're hearing it again here from Brett. It is something that I think is a superpower, what you just described. It is when you notice it for what it is. It's a raw sensation in the body. That's ultimately what it is. It's a sensation in the body. And to not let the initial interpretation of it, which is it's something bad, it's something negative, then stop you from acting. Instead, you reinterpret it in a way that is supportive. You see it as a friend, as an ally. I love the way you put it. And I'm so glad that we're talking about it here. Even in communication, it applies because it applies in every facet of life. And then the other thing you said there about how you have a unique value to offer, I think the other way of or pairing that is to then look at everybody else in the room and to realize that they are human beings with the same kind of fears and insecurities and self-doubt that you have. They aren't, we put them on a pedestal. Like that's what Dimitri's here doing in this story, right? Amir is on this pedestal. And because he's on this pedestal, he's so scared to speak with him. He sees him as this big authority figure. But in reality, Amir has the same kind of problems that most human beings have. He's had the same kind of imposter syndrome that many of us experience. And so I want you to expand a little bit on some of the tactical things, Brett, because I know that you have a lot to offer in terms of ways in which you can tactically work through this in the moment. There's something that I wrote down here that I want to just be sure I read accurately. You've talked about nonverbal communication being a power projector. And Dimitri, in this case, feels concerned that he doesn't have the same kind of authority or power as Amir. So, how would he then be able to project that kind of authority and that power so that he can be received positively by Amir?
Yeah, and for sure, that's a great question. And I think, as people, and especially as men, we're always, very consumed with power, right? And just being seen as people of power, and it's just something that's kind of in our DNA, and I think that's okay. And I think, when you break down charisma, it's probably, three pillars, right? It's power, it's warmth, and it's presence. But power is definitely a huge part of that equation. So I think for someone that maybe feels like they don't garner as much respect in meetings or conversations or just general day to day, and they don't feel like they project a persona of power, that there's certainly, a couple things, a couple skills that they can start to work on a day-to-day basis that I think that will, eventually help them to project more power in their lives. So I would say number one, and the best place to start, I think, with just projecting nonverbal power is posture. And I think that's such a simple one. I think if we sit with great posture, we are just going to project more power, more confidence at the dinner table, at the boardroom. If we stand with more posture, we are going to project our voices with more clarity. We're just going to look like a more confident person, a more powerful person. And I think it was Tony Robbins who actually broke down how to kind of feel great posture. And I think I was at his summit, Unleash the Power Within, and he described it in just a beautiful, simple way that I'd never heard before. And he was just like, to feel great posture, you want to feel like there's a string kind of pulling ever so slightly on your chest, pulling it out and pulling it up. And that's it. Shoulders are still relaxed. You don't want, I think some people think posture is like your shoulders are back and your arms are out. You look like
Right.
right. You look like a 1986 like Hulk Hogan action figure. Like, no, like that's not it. That's not what we want to project to the world. I mean, that's just not it. We want to project relaxed confidence. And I think a relaxed confidence is a relaxed shoulder, and it's your chest ever so slightly, not way out there, like you're really trying to prove something, but ever so slightly feel like there's a string pulling on your chest out and up. And to me, I think for anyone that's looking to project more nonverbal confidence, just set a reminder on your phone, 2, 3 times a day for a week that just says posture check. And when it goes off, if you realize you're slumped over, give yourself a little bit of a posture check. Pull that chest out with the string ever so slightly out and up. And I think just doing that for a week or two can really just ingrain that good posture habit, and it'll have you feeling more confident, and people will be reacting to you in a much different way as well.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember when we talked about that string technique many years ago. And what I found, the way you described it really worked for me, which is it became my primary focus. That was my intention for a number of weeks. And I've heard you talk about this before, which is you don't want to overwhelm yourself with too much. You don't want to say, hey, I want to have my posture right, and I want to work on tonality, and I want to work on not having any filler words, and I want to do, and you have a list of 10 things that you're trying to remember all of them.
Right.
Instead, just focus on the one, get it to where it feels much more like second nature and you've built it, then move to the next one. I find that to be a really effective way of approaching it. What are your thoughts?
Oh, completely agree. Yeah, I mean, if you're just going to your next barbecue, and yeah, you're trying to have great eye contact, great posture, you're trying to add pauses to your speech and add more metaphors to your stories, then you're going to be a mess. You're just going to be like this robot, this communication robot that's really not improving themselves at all. So, I completely agree. I think at the bare minimum, if you're going to a party or a social gathering, just pick out one skill that you're trying to ingrain, and really the overall goal of this party is just to enjoy yourself, right? And to be present. I think just being fully present to the moment is always going to be the bedrock that you build any charisma mansion on. Presence is always the most important thing, because if you're not present to the moment, then you can't fully show up to that moment. You're not going to be as nimble in the conversation if you're not fully present to that conversation. So number one overall is just be as present as possible. But then beyond that, just have one skill that you're working on. Maybe it's making more eye contact. Maybe it's adding more pauses to your speech, but just have one skill that you're working on per social outing. And I think that's a great idea. If you can span that over a week and say, listen, this week, I'm just working on my posture, that's even better, because then you're going to give yourself 5 days to stack on top and really ingrain that habit. And then the following week, move on to another skill once you feel like you're pretty comfortable with that posture habit being ingrained.
Yeah. And the one that you just brought up, I wanted to ask you about, and that's eye contact. And I know you talk a lot about eye contact. And of course, we all know how important it is. We know how important it is for human beings in conversation to connect with eye contact. I find that a lot of people struggle with it. It's really, really scary for them to hold eye contact. How do you recommend people to build that up? And maybe, as you were saying before, you don't want to overload yourself with too much and make it to where it's so fearful that you can't do it. How do you build up that skill of being able to hold more eye contact? As Dimitri really struggled with that in his story, how would you recommend he build up that skill?
Yeah, I think it's certainly something that we need to talk about is eye contact, because it is something that scares people, right? I think, when you look in someone's eyes, you can feel their energy. I mean, you can almost feel their soul. I mean, it's palpable. It is just something, a feeling inside of your chest that you almost can't describe, but you really feel another person's energy when you look into their eyes. And that feeling for a lot of people, and really all of us to an extent, it does bring up a little bit of fear. It's a little scary to look directly into someone's eyes for any longer than a second or two, but it is just so important. I mean, it fosters human connection unlike any other nonverbal piece of communication skill that we can implement. And not only that, but I think it also just makes us more empathetic, because if we're meeting someone's gaze, I think we're really taking in their message and we're understanding what they're saying to us on a much deeper level if we're not looking in their eyes. So I would say for someone like Dimitri, who obviously struggles with eye contact, and I think we all know two or three people in our lives that do struggle with making consistent eye contact. I think that there's some things that you can do, some baby steps you can take to get a little bit more comfortable with it. And, one thing I'll usually advise is don't look directly into the eyes at first. Look in between the eyes at the top of the bridge of the nose. And that just kind of gets you comfortable with looking at that area of the person's face. The person that you're talking to probably isn't going to know. They're going to think that you're looking in their eyes. You're not
Yeah.
looking in their eyes. Therefore, you're not feeling that exact same energy you would if you were. And I don't think it's as powerful. I do think that there is something real and substantial about making real eye contact. So we don't want to stop there. We don't want to just look in between people's eyes for the rest of our lives. But I do think that's a great kind of baby step towards looking in someone's eyes. It's just looking in that general direction in between the eyes. And then once you get comfortable with that, then start to move your gaze over to one of the eyes. And then I think once you get a little bit more comfortable, there are studies that kind of point towards like the ratios of eye contact that we should lean towards to be our most effective communicators. And one of those studies points towards the 50-70 rule. And basically what that says is you want to look in someone's eyes for 50% of the time that you're speaking, and you want to meet their gaze for 70% of the time while you're listening. So when you're speaking, you can look away from someone's eyes a little bit. And I think that is effective. I think if you look in someone's eyes too much while you're talking, you can kind of intimidate them, and you can kind of it'll make it tougher for them to focus on your message. I also think looking away from someone's eyes can help you recall more details about the story that you're telling. So you don't want to look in someone's eyes the entire time that you're talking to them, but I think around 50% is a good estimate to aim for. And then you do want to make a little more eye contact when someone's speaking to you. I think around that 70% mark is a good thing to aim for. Again, you don't need to stare a hole into their eyes the entire time they're talking. Look away here and there, but then more or less bring your gaze pretty quickly back to theirs to show that you're engaged with the message that they're delivering.
Yeah. That's a really good rule. I've never heard that 50-70. And I think with speaking specifically, it's oftentimes where people can struggle. Like I think it's a little easier to hold your eyes on someone when you're listening, but to
Mhm.
hold it while you're speaking is, I think, a real challenge. And one thing that I recommend for people to do is, even if you just start by doing it a little more than you're used to, like a little bit more than you're comfortable doing, just a little bit more, hold it for just a little bit longer. That is a win. That is you building up this skill set. I was
For
thinking
sure.
about I was thinking about an event that you and I went to where we saw a facilitator, Fry Man, and I know you remember
Oh,
Fry
the
Man.
fry. Of course, I remember the fry
He
man.
he was an incredible facilitator. But you remember, right? The way he spoke, he would hold his eye contact just a little longer than the average facilitator. Do you remember that?
Sure. Absolutely. I mean, he was definitely up there, and he wasn't just like speaking towards the back wall of the room. I mean, he was really making direct eye contact with everyone in the audience. And yeah, he would hold it for maybe a little bit more than the common person would be comfortable with.
Yeah, and it had an impression. I remember feeling like, "Whoa, he's
Oh, sure.
really talking to me." And as I've become just so fascinated by human psychology and the way we interact as human beings, I find that the people that have the greatest impact on me do that. They hold it just a bit more than the average person. So I would encourage anyone listening and anyone who relates to Dimitri's story to make that an intentional practice of holding it just a bit more than maybe you're comfortable doing. Now,
Yeah.
one thing you talked about, Brett, and I've heard you talk about it before, is the kind of questions that you ask. You said prepare a few questions maybe before you go in. But one thing you
Mhm.
don't like is when people ask boring questions. You encourage people to have a little bit more of an interesting kind of question, something that would spark more of a conversation. So let's say, Dimitri's there, he wants to talk to Amir, and he wants to ask a question that would evoke more of a connection. What would you recommend for him? How does he go about crafting some better questions than the "how's your day going" kind of question?
Right, yeah, and I think, for sure, "How's your day going?" Is just like, a death knell to that conversation. I mean, it is really it's a tough one, someone goes, "How's your day going?" And you just go, "My day's going good. How's your day going?" And then they go, "My day's going good." And then you're at a dead end. That conversation just ran into a brick wall, and we've all done that a million times, and I just think that, the more general the question is, the more boring the answer is gonna be, and the more uninteresting and less impactful that conversation is gonna wind up being. And I just think that with questions, we just gotta be a little bit more specific, like instead of, asking someone how their fitness, how's the gym been going? Maybe ask them, what's your workout routine look like right now? Like, there's a little bit more, specificity there. Like, someone can really sink their teeth into that answer, and they've got something to talk about for a minute or two, as opposed to, how's the gym going? You go, it's fine. As opposed to asking someone, how's work going? Maybe ask them, what's your average day at work look like right now? Like, there's something that someone can really kind of orate about for a minute or two or three, and they'll give you more details into what their life actually looks like right now. And so I just think with our questions, sure, I think there's some value in like a broad, boring question, maybe one just to kind of get the ball rolling and just kind of get voice to voice ping ponging back and forth. But once you've got that volley going, steer away from those boring, vague questions, and ask a bit of a more interesting, specific question that's going to garner a more specific answer, and it's just going to lead to a more interesting conversation that's going to cultivate that relationship on a much deeper level in the long run.
Yeah. Yeah, there's is it How to Talk to Anyone? Is that book that has all those different lessons? I have it
Yeah, it's
somewhere
like
on
it's
my
like a
shelf.
hundred it's like 100 different chapters. Yeah, it's definitely one of the OG communication skills book. It's a great one.
Yeah, and in it she refers to how using those more like what's the weather kind of thing question, like the more neutral and general kind of questions are more of like how you ease them in.
Right,
The way you're describing. Like, it's not like it's
right,
it's a terrible thing to ask somebody, "How are you?" It's just that's the formality of it, I guess. And then
right.
you go deeper into the question. So having that bank of specific questions. And in Dimitri's case, he could have really thought through the questions that are related potentially to his work or things he's heard about Amir. He could have maybe done some research beforehand, went on his LinkedIn, learned a little bit about him. And that, I think, could also give him an opportunity to find some common ground, because we tend to, well, we connect with people better when we talk about the things that they're also interested in.
100%, 100%. Yeah. If there is one or two or three specific targets at like a party or a gathering that you have in mind that you really want to cultivate a relationship with, yeah, I think just doing 5 minutes of research on who they are and what they're interested in can really pay some serious dividends. Maybe you learn, that they're a big Giants fan and you're a big football fan, and right there you've got something to talk about. Or maybe you learn, that they were part of the Alpha Sigma fraternity, and your father was part of that fraternity, and there's a connection that you can hit right there. Yeah, I think a few minutes of research on the people that you're directly really targeting some contact with at a social gathering beforehand can be one of the most effective things you can do.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, Brett, I want to close this out by asking you to kind of put yourself into Dimitri's story. So let's say you're there, you're at this event, and Dimitri sees you, and you're just being Brett McDermott. You're just talking to people, you're connecting people to other people, and he sees this and he goes, "Man, I'm inspired by this guy. I want to learn from him." And he has a moment and he has the courage to come up to you, and he tells you his story, tells you his problem. And you just have like just this few seconds here to give him one piece of advice, one thing that you hope will make a difference for him. What would you tell him right there?
It's a great question. I'd say that if there was just one piece of advice, and I've only got a few seconds with Dimitri because I've got to, I guess I got to go be Brett McDermott and schmooze it up with everyone else there. I'm only giving poor Dimitri a couple seconds of my time. This poor guy came up to me and poured his heart out, but I've only got.
You're a busy guy.
I'm a busy guy, Dimitri. I'm sorry. I don't have much time for you right now, but I would say that if I were to and Dimitri's got a lot of work to do, right? So it's not like I can really pinpoint necessarily one skill over the other, but I would just say to treat communication as a skill, and this is a skill that you can build, and maybe you're not where you want to be right now, but there are so many different things that go into being a great communicator, to being a great people person, to being able to connect with those around us, and just to devote yourself to the study of communications, and not only study but the practice of communication skills, people skills, the skill of connecting with those around us, just to devote time every week on the study and application of those fundamentals. And if he would just do that on a weekly basis, I think a year from now, he could be a totally different person in the way he relates to the people around him.
Yeah. I love that because it gives him and anybody else listening hope, because it can get better. It will get better. You just need to put the work in. You just need to practice it. So if anyone here, by the way, you need to check out Brett's podcast, The Persistence Playbook. Awesome podcast, great guests, great insights into communication, productivity, habit forming, goal setting. You need to check out his podcast, available on all platforms. And on Instagram, you have some great content, man. I really encourage people to check out your Instagram. It is at the Brett McDermott. All the stuff is in the show notes. Brett, thank you for taking time out of your day, brother, and sharing your wisdom with us. I really appreciate you taking the time.
Dude, this was a lot of fun, brother, and I appreciate you having me on Unstuck. And good luck on your podcast journey, man. I really think that you're a phenomenal interviewer. You're phenomenal at leading a conversation. I can't wait to see where the show is a year from now.
I've known Brett for over 20 years, and now you know why I wanted him to be a guest on the podcast. Not only is he brilliant with his insights, but he communicates it in such an easy way to digest and remember. But I'm going to do our best here to synthesize this down for you into our 3 insights and our 3 actionable takeaways. The first insight was giving yourself grace. You're human. If you mess up, if your fear takes over you, don't be so hard on yourself. Remember that you're going to keep trying. So learning how to be okay with that is such a big part of your journey in being a better communicator. Second, insight. Treat communication as a skill. It is something you build over time. Practice the skill. Devote yourself to the practice, and over time, you're going to find that your communication is improving. Third, insight. Use fear as an ally. When that fear comes up, lean into it. Get curious. Where is that sensation in my body? What does it feel like? And as Brett said wonderfully, it will then turn the volume down, and it won't fuel all of your behavior. And if you have to, use mantras or inner dialogue, as he mentioned, such as, I am a unique human being. I offer a unique perspective. My perspective adds value. Actionable takeaways. Number 1, before any outing, have a goal. That goal needs to be, how many conversations do you want to open? What is the main practice that you're focusing on cultivating? Don't attempt to do all 10 things that you may have learned from this episode in one event. Instead, it's, here's my one focus. Maybe it's posture, maybe it's eye contact, but that one focus and that target in mind of how many people you want to connect with is how you then are able to have success. And just a side note on this one, be sure to research the people beforehand that you really want to interact with so you can find some common ground. Second, actionable takeaway. For eye contact, follow the 50-70 rule. When speaking, hold your eye contact for 50% of the time. When listening, hold your eye contact for 70% of the time. And if this is a struggle for you, have baby steps. Start by maybe focusing on between the eyes, as Brett suggested, but that can't be the end. You have to then build yourself up to be able to hold your eyes to the other person's to really establish that connection. Third, actionable takeaway. Have questions prepared. At times we use those opening questions, how are you, how's your day? Then have more specific questions that will open up the conversation more. He used that example of, how's work going versus, what does your workday look like? It's a different answer. It will then open the person up to a deeper, more meaningful conversation. Join us in our next episode. On Friday, we'll have one of those shorter episodes. I'm going to go through 2 of the best books on communication that have had the greatest impact on me. And I've pulled so much from that in the work that I do in speaking and with coaching that I want to share with you. I'm going to pull out 2 of the best takeaways from the book. So one from each book. The first takeaway has to do with how you can be present with anyone and make sure that you're not drifting into thinking about other things, how you can really be with them in a conversation. And then the second takeaway is an acronym that I found perfectly defines how to build genuine connection and have more meaningful relationships. Until next time, thank you for listening.